start working now, otherwise we won't have time. We're going to be out of oil within a few years.
In doing this sort of pulling archival footage for this film, I found at least 10 examples of people in the late 70s talking about this is the end of oil. This is like end of a way of life. We're hitting a new era.
This situation is destined to continue.
People look at that footage and I think that they can feel that it's somewhat alarmist, given that we were able to continue our way of life for another 30, 35 years. Do you see any parallels between that time and now?
The 70s was really a critical decade. In the 70s, Marion King Hubbert, the original prophet of peak oil, in late 1949, he did the math that said U.S. domestic oil production will peak in 1970. So that's not some feat of Nostradamus communicating with some entity. It's math, it's science, it's simple. But in the 70s, M. King Hubbert testified before Congress. That was 1974. In 1976, President Jimmy Carter said, man, we cannot use as much energy as we have been using.
To use energy more efficiently.
That's when solar panels went up. That's when he started. He knew. They have known in Washington. I have published on my website, as have others, declassified CIA documents from 1976 showing that CIA was perfectly aware of peak oil. In those days, of course, when the situation appeared to be normal, when people had jobs, they had vacations, they had credit cards, they had credit lines, everybody's talking about growth, 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 buy, spend, consume, and everything seemed to be working. Yeah, we were called alarmists. We don't live in that world anymore.
Americans were on the way to owning millions of cars.
800 million internal combustion powered vehicles on the planet. They all run on oil. It takes uncounted barrels of oil to make those cars and engines in the first place, and you cannot plug any new technology into an internal combustion powered engine. With 7 gallons of oil in every tire, nobody will ever make 800 million new internal combustion anything because there ain't going to be enough oil. Ethanol is an absolute joke. First of all, a very brilliant scientist, David Pimentel, took the concept of net energy. How much energy do you invest versus how much do you get in return? And he concluded about a decade ago, I guess, that it takes more energy to make ethanol than you get from burning it, which is absolute stupidity. Because you drive the oil-powered machines, etc., you irrigate, you use the fertilizers, you're burning all that oil and natural gas to grow it. Then you make steam, which is more hydrocarbon energy. You add more chemicals, and you come up with ethanol, which you can put in a car. Now, the Bush administration had announced a goal of having 15% of all fuel in the United States made from ethanol, I think by the year 2015. They forgot to tell you that that would take all the arable land used to grow corn to do it. Canadian tar sands is an oil. It is a very, very thick, sticky, obnoxious substance that's mixed in with sand at levels 200, 300, 400, 500 feet in layers beneath the soil. This is in Alberta. And they literally strip mine thousands of tons a day. They put them in these huge oil-powered dump trucks and drive them to a place where they then wash the sand. They take millions and billions of gallons of fresh water, which we're running out of everywhere, and they boil it by burning natural gas. There is not a possibility anywhere that Canadian tar sands production will exceed maybe 3.5 million barrels a day. The first thing that the uneducated mind that's in denial says, well, what about hydrogen? Can't we make electric cars? And I have to bring them back to the fact that there's 7 gallons of oil in every tire, that there are thousands of gallons of oil in every car, in the plastics, the paints, the resins, everything, all of that's made by oil, the oil that's used to manufacture the car and ship it around to heat the metals, etc., etc. There will never be 800 million electric-powered vehicles, and electricity is not an energy source. Electricity is generated by burning or using some other kind of energy. It's clear that electricity is the key to industrial civilization in that it powers our refrigeration. It runs the water pumps that pump water out of the New York subway system every day. It allows us to commute electronically, charge our cell phone batteries, preserve food, run operating rooms, etc. The subject of alternative energies. There is no such thing as clean coal, and there never, ever will be. Why? Carbon sequestration is enormously expensive. What it says is essentially is you capture the CO2 and any other greenhouse gases emitted. In the burning of the coal, you exert enormous amounts of energy to compress it, then you move it over enormously long distances, and you pump it into some airtight chamber in the ground where somebody will figure out with technology what to do with the greenhouse gas in 10 or 15,000 years. Nuclear process requires something like 10 to 13 years of incubation to get the permitting done, all the regulations satisfied, and the construction of nuclear power plants is one of the most energy-intensive processes in the world. The steel, the lead containment, the enrichment of uranium is a horribly intensive process. You just don't throw a rock of uranium in and start making nuclear energy. Can't do that. The first and obvious problem with tidal energy is that it has to be generated or collected near a coastline. Salt water is extremely corrosive. There's an enormous net energy cost in manufacturing the machines. There are only two alternative energies which can really have an immediate impact, an immediate benefit. Now, the problem with plans like enormous wind farms in Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, the fundamental law with electricity is that it's drawn off right where it's used first. Yes, you can transmit electricity over long distances, but people don't think about the energy that goes into transformers and how much copper is in power lines and all the maintenance that has to go to that grid. So when you see really ridiculous commercials that say we could have a solar array 96 miles in the desert, they don't even think about the fact that that electricity is going to get used in California before it goes anyplace else.
Just, if you saw this movie and you didn't know who you were, and you were just curious what your credentials are in terms of understanding this information.
I have a bachelor's degree in political science with honors from UCLA, 1973. Graduate of the Los Angeles Police Academy, valedictorian. Class of 1173, was sent to do a DEA narcotics enforcement school by LAPD. I have 30 years of experience as an investigative journalist. I've broken major scandals that have had national impact. Of course, I got to know many members of Congress. I'd been trying to testify for a long time, and actually I have never testified in Congress. I did, at the request of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, submit written testimony, but after they read the written testimony that I was going to submit, I never got called to testify. I've written 2 books, one of which is in the Harvard Business School library. I've lectured at universities all over the country and in many countries. People wonder, how this guy with a bachelor's degree from UCLA came to know all this shit. Well, this comes from 30 years of learning how to scan mainstream media and read it. A way of finding stories from around the world that tell you all the things that are really going on, that are not played on the headlines, but they're the kind of stories that people who really make decisions know how to look for. And then how to connect them, how to place the dots close enough together so that they can be connected. the soil is the place from which all plant matter gets its nutrients. And if you keep sucking the nutrients out, the soil is useless. For all of history, the way the soil was replenished and the nutrients were returned in some measure to the soil was that plant matter was allowed to decay, to compost, to restock the soil. That's why crop rotation is so important. You may have one crop of celery which will suck certain chemicals out of the soil. Another crop, wheat or something else, may return those same chemicals to the soil. So the soil maintains a balance. It's kind of sad because we as a species have become so disconnected from the earth. We don't have any real contact with the earth. We don't have any sense of its functions, its feel, its nature, its seasons, its timing. First of all, the topsoil on which food is grown now is nothing more than a sponge onto which we pour chemicals that we get from oil and natural gas. And without those chemicals, the soil has been turned into a junkie. The soil is worthless. So when you plant a crop now, what happens is you drive an oil-powered machine, it drives along, and it plows. Then you drive another oil-powered machine, and it drives along, and it plants. And then you irrigate. Well, how do you irrigate? Well, that water is pumped by pumps that are powered by electricity. Where does that electricity come from? In the United States, it's either coal or natural gas. So next thing you do is come along and you fertilize it. All commercial fertilizers are made from ammonia, and the feedstock for ammonia is natural gas. So you have ammonium nitrate fertilizers that are then sprayed on by another oil-powered vehicle. Then the crop dusters come along that are powered by oil that spray pesticides that are all made from petroleum. Then when it's time to harvest the food, what do? You drive another oil-powered machine and you harvest it. You use another oil-powered machine to drive it to a place where it's processed. Then you wrap it up in plastic, which is oil, and you put it in another oil-powered machine, and you drive it X number of miles to a food distribution warehouse, an oil-powered machine to your supermarket. The way food is grown, produced, and moved around the world today, it's an enormous waste of hydrocarbon energy, which doesn't make sense. Why do we have strawberries from Chile? Why do we have spinach from China? Why do we ship anchovies halfway around the world to be packaged in tin cans and, you know? There are 10 calories of hydrocarbon energy in every calorie of food consumed in the industrialized world.